Okay, in the previous lesson we talked about the basic UI stuff in SpeedTree. Now let's continue to dive into the remaining ones. This next option is the scene, and it's going to be controlling and manipulating the objects that you have in the scene. And objects are divided into forces, collision, wind, and light. Of course, we're going to discuss in depth and learn a lot of things individually about these, but in this introductory lesson, we're going to be only discussing some basics so that you have a basic idea of what is going on. The first one is responsible for manipulating the forces in the scene, whether manipulating them or adding new forces. And these forces are pretty much important things in SpeedTree which you can use. And to get a better idea, let's create a new scene. Let me create a blank scene and add a trunk in here. And I really do not care about the size and the units in here, but to add a force in here, you simply go and, for example, let's add a magnet. It's going to add a magnet force in the scene, and you have the manipulator to move the magnet in here. For example, let's place the magnet up in here, and if you want your tree to be affected by this force that you have here, select your tree, and in the forces you see that the magnet has been added in here. And there's a checkbox in here which you can check. So you check it and it's going to be affected by the magnet. And if you move the magnet, you're able to control the shape of the tree using this magnet. And we're going to talk about these forces in depth later on. But this is to give you a quick idea. And the next option is for manipulating the collision objects. And this collision object is especially useful for games. For example, let me remove this magnet. Suppose that this is a tree and we really do not want the player to run into this tree and make this tree block the way of the player. And for that we simply go and add a collision object. And in this case, this is a sphere-like object that we have here. So we create a capsule and the player isn't going to be walking in this area and it's going to block the way of the player so that the player doesn't run into the tree. And of course you can manipulate the length and the radius and things like that. And it's especially useful for games and interactive programs. And the next option is for wind and creating and manipulating the wind in your scene. Now you see the tree isn't moving at all and it's a static mesh pretty much. We are able to edit the wind properties, and using this wind wizard you are able to use from the presets that SpeedTree has to create a wind system for your tree. For example, telling that if this static mesh is a bush, if it's a grass, if it's a palm tree, it has some presets to help you out. And as I said, we're going to discuss them later on. But let's enable the wind. Now you see the tree is moving just pretty much naturally. Toggle these to oscillate between these min and max value. This is the maximum that it can go. For example, let's set it right here, and now it's going to oscillate between from here and here. Let it just calculate so that you see the strength. And this is for preview purposes to see how the tree is acting in the wind. So let's disable the wind. And the next one is for manipulating the light that you see in the scene. Now we are seeing a daylight scene. Of course, this is where you can edit the lighting manually. For example, the ground, you can change it to whatever you want. Or the better way is to use some of the presets in here. And one wonderful one is the night. Now you see the scene has changed to a nighttime scene to see what PBR materials are doing in different lighting conditions, even before exporting this tree to an application, for example, Unreal or Max or Blender or whatever. You check some of the light presets in here, for example, desert. going to give you an idea of how the PBR materials and the tree are looking in different lighting conditions. The next option is the shadows, and the default one is the medium quality. And if you bring it up high, it's going to compute the shadows to ultra quality, or you can disable them completely. You see, now the shadows are gone, and it's for times if you have a weaker machine, or if you want to make the shadows go to ultra quality like this. So let's change the preset to the standard one. And again, in here, you can render the ambient occlusion or clear the ambient occlusion as well. The next one is the resolution, and it's pretty much self-explanatory. You can bring the resolution of the model down depending on the resolution slider that you create for these generators. And we're going to be talking about these later on. But to get an idea, if you set it to medium, just look at this resolution number. And let's go to this mode to be able to see the polygons. Okay, this is the polygon. If you go to medium, you see the polygon count comes down much more. And let's go to low. Now you see the polygon coming down lower even. And if we zoom on here, you're able to see that the polygons have been decreased drastically. And this has its own use cases, which we will talk about later on. And everything you do is going to clear the ambient occlusion data, so it's recommended to turn it back on. Now we are in high resolution, and let's go for ambient occlusion and render. And it's going to make your tree pop up a little bit more, like this, adding a bit of depth on areas which the sun isn't going to reach out. The next one, which is an important one, is cycling between the different modes, the generator mode, the node mode, and the freehand mode. And before that, we need to really discuss what these are. So let's go to our new default scene and hide these. So a speed tree is based on proceduralism, and the heart of the speed tree is in here, in the generation panel. In this generation panel, you're able to add all sorts of things that combine a tree. For example, a trunk, branches, or leaves, and anything basically. And any of these that you add in here is called a generator. For example, this is a trunk generator, and it's going to have a lot of properties to enable you manipulate the tree and the trunk of the tree to your liking. So this is called a generator, these that you add in here. And each generator has been composed of multiple nodes. For example, let's add some branches into here, and let's bring the number up high. You see, now if I select this one, this is a branch generator. And this branch generator has been composed of 25 nodes. And each individual branch in here is called a node. And when you're working in the generation mode, you're only able to select them as a whole. But if you go to node mode, you're able to select them individually and work on them, do any changes that you want, selecting them, rotating, and basically do anything that you want to make this. Excuse me, it crashed, but I recovered the scene, and we have the trunk in here. So if you go to node mode, you're able to manipulate them and even deleting them, because the procedurals are going to get you halfway there. And to go and be maximum realistic in creating the tree, you're going to be having to do some manual changes, and those manual changes are going to be delivered in the node mode, and you're able to manipulate the mode by hitting tab to go to different modes. And the next one is freehand, which we will be talking about later on. This has been added in SpeedTree latest versions, and it's good for fine-tuning and last final minute touches. And the best way to create the tree in a SpeedTree is to go with the generators and go procedural to a certain way, and then after that go to node mode and start manipulating the individual nodes and do the final touches in the freehand mode. Of course, this is the introductory course, and later on we're going to discuss what each of these modes do. And next up in the edit section, you're able to add, and this one is equivalent if you right click on the tree and add geometry to selected. This is just like that. You are able to add generators in here. And even you can import your own meshes, your own photogrammetry meshes, or decorative meshes, or custom meshes to the scene and start creating the model. Of course, we are going to be talking about them later on. So, and you can of course go and if you select this, it's going to be hierarchical. If you select this and hit add and add branches, it's going to add it to the branches that we were selected. And if we select this one and go to add again and hit branches, it's going to add these branches to the latest layer. And the next one is visibility, which you can of course control using H. And if you select something, for example a generator, and you can hit H to hide it. And this of course works both in generator mode and node mode. For example, if I go to node mode and select each of the branches and hit H, it's going to hide this one only. But if I go to generator mode and select these branches and hit H, it's going to hide the generator for us, not the nodes. And the next grade mode is the focus mode. Let me select this and hit H to bring it back. And by focus mode, you're able to focus only on particular nodes. Let me go this tree. And for example, let's select a node. Let's select a generator. I'm going to select this branch in here and hit the focus mode. Hit F. And it's going to hide anything but the node that I have clicked on in here. And it's going to show the anatomy that creates this. It's going to show the trunk and the big branch and little branch and then the branch that I have selected. And of course there are different modes which are focus siblings, which is going to hide anything after this node in the generation panel. And there's of course focus ancestors, which is going to show only the necessary things in here. And to clear the focus and go back to the default one, you hit Ctrl and F to reveal all of the tree. And the next one is gizmo, which are pretty much what you expect from a gizmo. It's move, rotate, and resize. And by default, the coordinates are in world, but if you want to make them local, you can make them local. For example, if I set this to local, now based on the rotation of the tree, the gizmos have been changed. And the next option is the seasons, which is one of the most amazing features that a SpeedTree has. And if you make the settings right, if you select this season, you're able to go from spring to winter and see your tree in every season. For example, let's go to autumn, and it's going to decolor the trees, decolor the leaves, make some of the leaves fallen, and do all kinds of things that you see in every season. And for example, if you go to winter, it's going to completely remove all of the leaves from the tree and leave just a couple of ones in here. And of course, we're going to make seasons later on. And this is just to give you an idea. But to make the seasons work, there are some preparations that you need to do. For example, just setting up the appropriate material and fixing the generators to do that. Okay, the next option is the AO, which have been covered. By holding down O, you're able to generate the ambient occlusion. And there's collision, which you create collision for leaves. And using down this, you're able to minimize or maximize the toolbar, which enables you to see the texts or icons themselves. So we have covered all of these parts, and the remaining part now is the material part in here, which you can of course summon the textures and do all kinds of manipulations to them. For example, you can bring in textures in here and create materials and meshes as well. and you can create cutout meshes and do some UV things in here. So I believe this is enough for the UI and navigation and basic stuff. Now that we have a little bit of understanding of what a SpeedTree is and how it works, we are able to go deeper, and we will do that in the next sessions. Okay, see you there.